Hey, I'm Espen Kraft, thanks for watching. You know, not all 80s samplers are awesome. If you followed my channel for a while, you know I love 80s samplers and I use them a lot in my music. However, there are some examples of 80s samplers that are truly not very great, and this is one of them. This is the Korg DSM-1, the module version of the mighty DSS-1. And the DSS-1, now this is an awesome synth that also can do sampling. The same is true for the DSM-1, but when Korg released the DSM-1 in 1987, this seriously crippled a lot of functions and features from the DSS-1 and left us with a DSM-1 that was, well, far from overwhelming. And today we're checking it out.
Now, to be fair, the DSM-1 has some specs that really up the specs of the DSS-1. Among them, it has 4 times the memory of the DSS-1. It uses the HD-floppies instead of the double-side, double-density 800 kilobytes of the DSS-1. And the CPU and computing power was slightly increased, so it is faster in some of the operations. The polyphony was increased to 16 voices over the 8 of the DSS-1 as well. This, however, is the greatest asset of the DSM-1, 16 individual outputs. And on paper, this made it the perfect slave to be used as a drum sampler. Gaining access to these 16 outputs, well, that proved to be somewhat of a hassle, as we shall see. And pay attention to this high-speed interface that Korg never seemed to utilize in the DSM-1. And so after firing up the DSM-1, you have to format a performance disk. In itself, not that unusual for a sampler to use a floppy disk for storing programs and samples. However, in the case of the DSM-1, you have to format yet another floppy disk, a work floppy disk. So you have to constantly swap the performance and work disk to get some work done on the DSM-1. In itself, slightly annoying. And even if the DSM-1 has the ability to import DSS-1 programs and samples from a floppy, that too comes with its own set of limitations, due to the fact that the internal hierarchy of the DSM-1 and DSS-1 are very different. In the DSM-1, it's crucial to understand the combination mode where you set up different programs. You have single modes, you have multi-modes, you have split modes, and you have manual modes. And it all boils down to 4 different timbres: A, B, C, and D. So the hierarchy within a DSM-1 is you have a sound, and that contains a multisound, and a multisound contains a program. And when you add a multisound and a program together, then you get a timbre, and you can have 4 of these in a combination, and that makes up a system. So now as I go through timbre A in a combination mode, I can set different parameters that will apply to that timbre, like octave changes, tuning, etc. I can also change what output it will be run through. I can set up different MIDI channels for different timbres, etc., etc. And this is the way you'd set up a combination of different drum sounds going out different outputs, etc. And this is also how you can make the DSM-1 a stereo output by routing the same sound to 2 different outputs, for example, and panning those in a mixer. So the flexibility is great, and the possibilities are endless. But compared to other samplers of the time, and then again, especially Akai, this was highly cumbersome and too much of a hassle for most users, and the DSM-1 pretty much bombed on the market. And Korg pretty much gave up on making samplers for a long time. But to test this, I've set up now a combination where I'm using some of the individual outputs to get some tracks going, which I'm going to sequence from a Roland MC500 as I'm working on that for the moment, as I'm working on my album. So let's check that out. So I routed these drum sounds out the back of the DSM-1 and applying some different kinds of effects in the mixer, in the DAW in this case. But I'm sequencing it all from the Roland MC500 along with some other sounds as well. Let's check it out. And here you can see the boards for the different voices. You have 16 voices of polyphony in the DSM-1 within blocks of 4, as you can see. And with vintage gear, it's always a good thing to check the power supply for bulging capacitors once the top lid is open.
Maintenance and repairs aren't strangers to us dabbling in vintage gear. So let's take a quick look at my sponsor for this video, PCBWay. And PCBWay is a company that can deliver custom-made circuit boards for your projects. They ship fast, they ship efficient, and they have a very good pricing and a very good quality control. So I definitely think you should check them out if you have needs in terms of circuit boards for your projects.
And check out the price list for the 1988 Korg collection. You can see the DSM-1 at the top there at around 32,000 Danish kroner. It was the same in Norwegian kroner, and that would be around $3,500 in 1988. And when it comes to the synth engine of the DSM-1 compared to the DSS-1, well, there's a lot to be desired. For one, there's no resonance. The filter has no resonance. And just as on the DSS-1, it doesn't update in real time as you change the value. You have to play the chord again to hear the new change on the filter. The DSM-1 lacks both the nice digital delays of the DSS-1. It has no oscillator sync. It has no noise generator. Where the DSS-1 would let you use 2 programs as 2 oscillators, the DSM-1 only lets you have 1. So forget about those internal detuning between oscillators. And you cannot draw waveforms on the DSM-1 as you could on the DSS-1. Not that useful anyway, I admit to that. But let's play with that filter and the envelopes as I'm playing through some drum loops I have sequenced on the MC500. I'm also using the pitch bend in real time to get some crunch going here. And so just to remind you how powerful the filter of the DSS-1 could be, check this out from my video. And here's the DSM-1.
Well, I don't have much love for the DSM-1. Well, you could get those muscle memories going, so we could work fast on this, I guess, if it was the only thing you had. And a lot of musicians could only afford one piece of serious equipment back in the day as a sampler. And I'm guessing that if you only had this, you could work it fast. Today, It's more of a collector's item, even for me. I use the DSS-1 if I want that juicy Korg sampling sound that the DSS-1 can do so fantastically. So the DSM-1 I really don't recommend unless you have a lot of samplers from before and you want it in your collection. And with that, we've come to the end of this episode. As always, I'm Espen Kraft and I am the 80s. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.